We're going to talk about how to assess your tests, the tests you're using, because even if it's produced by someone else, it doesn't always mean it's great. You can assume it's good if it's a big publisher. Not always great, but good, at least good. And we're going to talk about how to assess it. And I think it's going to really open your eyes for some of you on like, wow, I can assess a test. I don't have to be this perfect methodologist. I can actually have the confidence to answer whether this is a solid test or not. That's the goal of this. Partly the goal is to imbue you. Imbue is a nice French word, I-M-B-U-E, imbue you with confidence. Just like a sports coach, we want our group, our team to win. And if we look at it like that, then we do everything in our power to help them win. We're not the adversary, the opponent, the enemy, although some of the students might think we are. If your assessment ideas are like people are going, what? We didn't study this. I can't tell you how many students, how many classes, how many teachers I heard say, students say, well, we didn't cover that. Why am I being you probably had this experience. We just talked about that for a few minutes. Now it's on the test. That's not really fair. So if students start to question in that manner, it's a bad sign. If you go to a methodology, if you have methodology in your teacher training, in theory, and literally it is in theory, the course is theoretical. In theory, you should learn about it. But in practice, it's my experience that most people don't really keep what they learned in methods and assessment class. Test them on what you taught them. Here's the question I ask. Did I teach them the answer to that question? It's that simple. If it's a no, now here's where we talk about discipline. If it's a no, you delete the question. It doesn't matter if you know the answer to the question. It doesn't matter if it's your favorite question. It doesn't matter if it's your favorite subject. The question is, did you teach them sufficiently on this for them to answer it correctly? I told my class at the university, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you, well, I had key questions for every class. So they were all lined up at the end, 18 clear questions that I provided answers to. I said, here's what we're going to do, because this is a summer course. It's a bit more relaxed. So we're going to cut the answers. I'm going to cut 45% off. So we're going to have 10 questions. You study for 10. I'll ask 4 of the 10. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. Here's a tricky question. You're doing a test on third conditional and you throw in a mixed conditional. Why? Because you love the sentence or you love mixed conditionals, but you only briefly mentioned mixed conditionals. You technically talked about it, but never taught it. And you throw it out. It doesn't matter how much you love that sentence. It doesn't matter how much you love mixed conditionals. It matters how much you taught or how much they studied and learned mixed conditionals. If it's a test on third conditional, you should only see third conditional. But I'm not saying don't challenge them. This is not what I'm saying. Let me give you an example of a challenge that's, I believe, okay. You've talked about conditionals. Most of your examples were in this traditional form. If it stops raining, I will go to football practice. But in the test, I invert it. Because obviously there were some examples in the class that were inverted. I mentioned inversion, but most of them were in the normal order. This is fine because this is still what first conditional is all about. There are 2 parts of the sentence and they are exchangeable. You can put them in either position. Don't be unnecessarily difficult. And you know what I find amongst teachers, especially young ones, but again, amongst teachers, is that they're unnecessarily difficult. They make the test more difficult than it needs to be. Let me give you an example. Speaking tests. You choose topics that interest you, but that aren't so common to your students. So gardening, special diets, you're doing, I don't know, this a special form of vegan diet that you're on, but none of your students who are 8 years old really know what a vegan diet is. Or gardening, and you're teaching a group of I don't know, maybe I'm stereotyping now, but most of the students are men or something. Topics that are going to be naturally very difficult because they don't have any experience doing them. So I ask myself, is the topic fair? Is it appropriate? Is it one they're going to use in the future? If it's not, it's unfair. Don't be unnecessarily difficult relates to point number 3. Don't teach or examine at the extremes. A lot of teachers do this. A lot of bloggers do this. A big blogger advertising their pronunciation course. And you know how they were getting people to sign up? By making them feel inadequate or bad. Now, psychologically, and if you look at sales techniques and strategy, this is brilliant. People feel wholly inadequate. Let me write that phrase down. It means completely not qualified. They felt wholly inadequate. Let me tell you what they did. They gave a sentence, their last sentence. They said, if you can answer these, you don't need to take my class. And they gave, I was listening to it from a methodological perspective. And I'll never forget. And the last example, I didn't understand. No one understood it. And of course, everyone who took the short test online, it had a lot of views, it was being advertised, everyone missed it. And they said, if you missed any of these, you need to take the class. And then they sort of gave the answers. Now, this was great for marketing and strategy or sales, terrible methodology. And so what I understood from that is, all right, you might make a lot of sales, but you are not probably going to be a great teacher. You don't teach at the extremes. You don't make kids feel bad about their talents. Now, they can feel bad if they didn't study. They can feel bad, you know, when they should feel bad, but they shouldn't feel bad based on your test selection question. You're doing a vocabulary exam for preteens on items found in the bathroom, and you've come across a word that's pretty advanced, commode, which is a word in English. It's a synonym for toilet. Now, it is a word in the bathroom. It is, broadly speaking, correct. Why is it unfair? Why is it extreme? Because nobody uses this word anymore. We used it when I was growing up. Nobody uses it today. Are they going to use that in the future? What's the likelihood they're going to use it? If it's not likely or higher, I take it off the test. Cry off. We're doing phrasal verbs and we get to cry. We're doing, I don't know, emotions, phrasal verbs with emotions. This is interesting. But no one says that anymore. Zero people, well, I say zero, almost no one says that. No one my age says it, but we would understand it. But I can tell you most Americans wouldn't understand what that is because we don't say it. I hope I didn't step on anyone's toes. Do you know what it means? A nice saying here. What does it mean to step on your toes? If I stepped on your toes, what happened? Other than you got your shoes dirty.
Somebody insults, offend.
Yeah, I'm talking right to them, so they might get offended. They might, you know, they might feel, oh my gosh, that's me. They do the test, and now you give the remarks. This is really important. Students want feedback on their tests. This is where your remarks are like gold. You can crush them, you can bring them up, you can mislead them, you can bring them on the right path. This is a very critical juncture of this assessment process, what the teacher says. So here's the question I ask myself. What's the most important observation? Not what's the easiest to explain. No. Not what is the thing that I feel most passionate about. No. What's the thing that the student always made mistakes on? No. Those are interesting, but that's not the right question to ask. The right question that I should answer, the question that I should answer is, what's the most important observation I can make? That's going to help them the most. Start with the biggest and then work your way down. So how I give feedback, I start from the most important to the least important. I go both positive and negative. Most important is both positive and negative, not just negative. If there are many important issues to discuss, then I forego. Forego is a fancy word for omit, leave out, leave for the future, leave for a later day, the smaller issues. You don't want to inundate someone. Inundate is a fancy word for overload. You don't want to inundate your students with so many different corrections. I'll never forget a teacher. I should have kept this. We had, I was the director of academic writing at the University of Warsaw. And we had, in fact, our most talented teacher. I say talented in that she was the brightest, the cleverest of the group, but they were all very strong. So a student complained, and it came back to me, the complaint, and he said he complained about the grade, and I asked for the assessment. So she sent me the assessment, and she did an amazingly thorough job. The point, however, was that it was so thorough because she wanted the student to improve so much, the whole paper was in red. In other words, there was not a line that was spared. There were multiple corrections on every line. I would say 3 or 4 per line, not per sentence, per line, 3 or 4, which told me the teacher is amazingly detailed, which is great. We want thorough teachers, but what she didn't understand is proportion. In all of this, there was nothing positive that was uttered. It was only what the student had done wrong, and clearly the student was a good student. But from looking at that assessed paper, you would have no idea the student was good, because everything, and there were hundreds, I mean, you add up, 25 lines, 100 corrections. The student was left depressed. That's out of proportion. That is out of proportion. Students will have a very bad feeling after seeing that. And they will think, my gosh, I'm not doing anything right. Sometimes teachers just overload it with negativity. There's no such thing as a all wrong paper or all wrong speech. There are positives everywhere. And the truth is, students need to know as much what they're doing right as what they're doing wrong. It's the most important point here. Feedback is both positive and critical or negative. It's not just one. It's not just the other. You can't just say, oh, that's an amazing job when there are obvious mistakes. That's also misleading. They're going to leave the classroom thinking they're great, and they're not. They're definitely not. So they need to know the best thing you can do is show a realistic picture of where they're at. Realistic means both positive and negative in the right proportions. I can tell you that this is a very difficult skill to master, and I've seen it done wrong more times than I've seen it done right or accurate.